Good morning, good evening, and hello everyone. My name is Payal Tandon, and I will be your main host today in this webinar. I welcome you all to this session in which we're going to talk about how to solve algebra questions and get to that 90th percentile. What level of conceptual understanding you absolutely need to have, what level of practice you need to have in order to solve these questions with utmost ease. So we are going to focus on algebra today, specifically quadratic inequalities, absolute equations, linear inequalities, absolute inequalities. But whatever you learn in this session is going to be applicable for other topics of algebra along with all the other sections of quant as well. So the learnings that you have from this session are going to be applicable across the board for all of quant. All right, so with me, I have Sandeep. He will be supporting us in this session. So all the questions that you ask us on the Q&A pod, he will be responding to those. All right, so let's get going with this. I hope you all got some chance to go through these video lessons, and if you haven't already gone through these, I would want you to log into your free trial, and in case you are not e-GMAT students as yet, I would want you to log into your free trial after this session so that you can enjoy these lessons and you can learn, you can get to that conceptual clarity that we absolutely want you to have. All right. So by show of hands, or by show of yeses in this online environment, let me just see how many of you have gone through these lessons, just to get an idea. Okay, about less than 30%. Okay, all right. Well, I hope that all of you do get a chance to go through these lessons after this session is over. Now, every weekend on Saturdays and Sundays, we conduct these webinars. Next Saturday, we have GMAT strategy webinar. So if you have concerns about how do I set up my study plan, what do I need to focus on as I am preparing? Do I do verbal first? Do I do quant first? How much time should I spend for each of the others, for each of the sections? If those are the questions in your head, if you've been prepared, regardless of whether you are just starting to prepare or whether you have been preparing, definitely attend this webinar because it's going to clarify a lot of misconceptions that students have, and it's going to bring to the forefront what are the things that are absolutely important for your GMAT preparation. So definitely register for that now. Um, Likewise, if you've been preparing for quant for some time and you want to just gauge where you're at, assess yourself, then come and attend this webinar on quant workshop, in which we will give you very precise insights as to your current level in quant, and you will get to know what is it that you need to focus on going forward so that you can get to your target score. Okay. All right. With that, let's get a sense of where we are all at in terms of our GMAT test date. Appears that majority of the class, a pretty large segment, about 47% of the class, will be taking the GMAT beyond 75 days. All right, so it seems as if you guys are majority of this class is more than 30 days away from taking the test, which makes you guys an absolutely wonderful candidates to get the learnings from this session. For those of you who have your test within the next 15 days or within the next 30 days, you guys are also in this session to learn a lot about where is it that you need to focus on. Even if you get two insights from this session, two areas that you need to focus on, that itself can have a very significant impact on your end score. And you will realize what I'm talking about as I go into this session. All right, then. So I'm going to change the presentation pod here. The layout is going to change at your end. What you're going to see is algebra session presentation in the center of the screen. And as soon as you start to see algebra quant live session written on the screen, please press on the yes button in the poll that you see on the side. It does take a couple of seconds for the screen to stabilize. Okay, so I can see that almost all of you can see the new screen. All right, sounds good. Now, just a couple of housekeeping tips. Um, yeah. So you see the Q&A pod on the bottom side of the screen, right? These are the questions that you need to, so any questions that you have for me or for Sandeep, and by the way, Shweta would also be supporting us in this session. So you will be hearing from Sandeep and Shweta in the Q&A pod. So any questions that you have of us, please post those in the Q&A pod. I would ideally want you to focus on the presentation that's going on so that your attention is not diverted to other aspects. But if you have any other questions about your planning or whatsoever, feel free to post those questions in the Q&A pod. Now, the polls that you see on the right-hand side, the yes, no poll and the short answer poll, those polls are reserved for questions that I ask from you. So if I ask you a question, I would want you to post those responses in these polls and not in the Q&A pod. Okay, so just want to make sure that you understand Q&A pod are questions initiated by you. Yes and no and short answer pods are questions or comments that I want you to put in over here. Okay. All right. So with that, let's get going with this session. Usually we do provide you all with a brief intro about e-GMAT. With a show of hands, with a show of yes, tell me how many of you are aware of what we do. How many of you are aware of the e-GMAT courses and all that? Yeah. Okay, so it seems majority of you are. So I'm going to skip this portion and get right into the subject matter portion of the session so that yeah. All right, let me just, okay. All right, so what are we going to do in this session? We are going to talk about, I'm not going to teach you any concepts. That's for sure. Okay. Why? Because learning of concepts it has to be done from the concept files, and that's the reason why we have such a generous free trial so that all of you e-GMAT students as well as people who are not as yet students can benefit from the conceptual understanding that we offer. Okay. So that's the reason why I wanted all of you to have gone through those files. Now, even if you haven't gone through those files, which is what we know because I took the information from you, it's okay because you guys do have certain basic understanding of how to solve linear inequalities, of how to deal with absolute value inequalities and absolute value equations. So again, the point of all this is that I will not be teaching you the concepts, but I will be teaching you the application of those concepts. Now, as I solve these questions, what you will realize is that I will time and again be focusing on, do you have that 100% conceptual clarity? Okay. And as I prod on those questions, I want you to think about this on your own, that am I as equipped to answer these questions as I think I am? Okay. So again, this session it should act more of a self-critique for you. Think about us being over here as means for you to be able to critique how is it that you are preparing for algebra right now. Okay, so again, a lot of this will get clarified as we solve questions together. Okay, and again, process of solving questions. At e-GMAT, we are a firm believer of, each one of us is a firm believer of following a structured process. Okay, whether it's verbal questions, SC questions, CR questions, RC questions, or quant questions. For problem solving questions, there has to be a certain process. For data sufficiency questions, there has to be a certain process. And weaved in this process are what we call as process skills. And the application of those process skills is what leads you to get to the solution in a step-by-step manner. And you will realize what I'm talking about when we start solving questions. Okay. All right. And then again, as you interact with me in this session, I want you to take those key takeaways, understand, okay, where is it that you're faltering? What is it that you're not doing? What is it that you need to focus on? Okay, because when you start to do that, that's when the learning that happens offline, when I'm not sitting in front of you over here, that learning then gets amplified. Okay, so again, be very upfront in taking that feedback, in taking that critical feedback of what are the potential gaps. My very big mantra for quant especially is don't consider anything to be, oh, I made a silly mistake. Because whenever you start to classify your errors as silly mistakes, that those are the opportunities that you miss out on. Those are those missed opportunities that can take you to that next level in your preparation. And I'll talk about, and I'll definitely explain what I mean by this. Now, how is this session going to progress? We are going to start off with very basic questions. Just to get you warmed up, I don't want to give you 700 level questions right off the bat. So we'll give you very basic questions, basic, simple application of concepts. There'll be 6 of those. So we'll solve a set of 2 or 3 questions together. Then I'm going to go through the solution of those questions, then the next set of 2 or 3 questions. So we'll do it that way. Then we're going to go into applying those concepts and process skills in the context of the GMAT. And this is where we'll end up solving about 8 questions. And most of these questions are 700 level questions. Okay. Now, again, you will have progressive learning here. So as you learn from one question, definitely apply those learnings to the next set of questions. Okay, so let's get started with our warm-up section. Now, before I go ahead, let me just understand how many of you feel at least 80% confident with the concepts in algebra. At least 80% confident. Okay, it's about 70%, about 60% of the class. All right. Now tell me, why do you face issues in algebra? Lack of practice, can't remember it, basics are not clear, simplification, question understanding, not enough problem solving, don't know when to solve, don't know, incorrect application of formulas by not understanding concepts well enough. Okay, basics are not clear. Okay, recalling factor, too rushed response, difficulty understanding. Okay. Don't know when to solve algebraic equations versus when to plug in numbers. Okay, not considering all possibilities. All right, so I have quite a varied response here as to what problems you face and why. All right, so let's see as we solve these questions. I aim to address some of these problems. Okay, all right, just a quick comment here. As I asked you this question, I saw a couple of you posting your responses in the Q&A pod. Again, as I said earlier, the questions that I ask, please put the responses for those in the short answer poll. Reason being quite simple, that I am not looking at the Q&A pod as frequently because I'm delivering the webinar. So whenever I ask questions, I look for your answers in the short answer poll. So I know you would get used to it, but it's my responsibility to remind you of that so that the session goes on rather smoothly. All right. So let's get into our first question, and I hope you all have a pen and a paper ready as to take notes and to solve these questions. Okay. Now, typically what I do is whenever I ask you to solve the question, I ask you to first click on still solving, because that tells me how many of you are actively engaged in solving the question. Now, the reason for that is I don't give you a very set timeline for the questions that you have to solve these questions within, let's say, a minute or two. I go by when the class in general has put in the responses. So when about 50% of the class puts in the response, I give you a 15-second warning or a 30-second warning depending upon the difficulty level of the question. Okay, so that's the reason why clicking on still solving is very important, so that we are not waiting for people who are not really that actively engaged in solving the question. And right now I have about 206 people. So let's get this number to at least 100, if not to 150. Okay, slowly but steadily the number is increasing. I will wait till 100. All right, almost there. Just a couple more, two more. Okay, there you go. All right, so here's the first question. Solve it, please. All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Now here comes question 2. Please click on still solving. Okay, here's question number 2. So in this section, we are solving 3 questions together, and then we'll discuss the answers to all the 3 questions. Okay? All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. I'm going to get question number 3. Yeah, please click on still solving. All right. Here's question number 3. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, then I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so how was the experience with these three warm-up questions? Were they easy? Something very comfortable to solve? Were you confused while you were solving the questions? Moderate. First two were easy, the last one was not. Decent. Two and three were more difficult. Okay, third was a little moderate. Okay, all right. So, yes, these were questions in progressively increasing difficulty level, but they are under 700 level, definitely. These are all warm-up questions, so these will not be difficult. Okay, so let's discuss each of these questions in detail. And let me get the poll for the first one. Here it goes. So the correct answer here is choice B, which about 73% of the class selected. And again, this one was the easiest of the lot. So let's just go through what's going on in this question. This is a simple inequality in y. So all we have to do is rearrange the terms and get to the answer. So we move minus y to the left side, and then we collect all the y terms together, and then we move plus 10 to the right hand side. What we get is 5y is greater than minus 10, and then we divide both sides of the inequality by 5, and we get y is greater than minus 2. Okay, so choice B is the correct answer. Now, I do see some of you selected choice A as the correct answer. You probably end up making a silly, again, this one is that you didn't pay attention to the sign. Okay, so you need to understand why did that happen, right? Now, there are some of you who could not solve this inequality at all, which is a very solid indication that you're not comfortable solving linear inequalities. So that's a skill set that you definitely need to build. Okay, and for that, look at the concept files that is available to you in the free trial if you're not as yet an e-GMAT quant student. Okay, so that's about question number one. Now let's talk about question number two. What's going on with that? And the correct answer here is choice B, which only about 60% of the class could select. Okay, so as I said, these are progressively difficult questions. Now, here, instead of having one inequality, as in the previous question, we have two inequalities. So you have to solve the system of linear inequalities. So there is some manipulation required when you solve the system of linear inequalities, and that's what we are doing over here. We take this first equation, first inequality, x minus y greater than minus 3, and we multiply both sides by 2. Why are we doing that? Because we do observe that in the second inequality there is minus 2x. So the goal for solving any system of equations or inequalities is to first isolate one variable, get to the answer for that, and then carry on with your solution. So that's what we are doing. We're multiplying both sides of the inequality, the first one by 2, and then we add the two inequalities. Again, whenever we add two inequalities, we have to be very careful that they have both the same sign that both the inequalities should have the same sign. Okay, you cannot add two inequalities when one of them has greater than sign and the other one has less than sign. So that's something which you have to be very careful about. Okay, so when you add the two inequalities, 2x and minus 2x get cancelled out, and you get y is greater than minus 2, and that's what the answer is, choice B. Now again, there are quite a few of you, about 20% of the class could not solve this inequality to begin with, this system, which again, my best guess is that people who were not able to solve linear inequalities, the single linear inequality in the previous question, those people continue to face problems here as well. And then there were few of other folks as well who could not solve this. So again, basic concepts. We are not even talking about complicated application of those concepts. We are talking about very, very basic concepts. But if the basics are not clear, then you will find it very difficult to answer even 650 level questions. So my feedback to those of you who could not get this question correct is that please focus on building your concepts. Okay. There's no point in you solving difficult questions if your concepts are not solid enough right now. Okay, now let's talk about question number 3. Question number 3 is a rather interesting question. It's still easy. We're still not talking about difficult questions. The correct answer here is choice C. Okay. Now, when I say that the correct answer is choice C, what I will say is that people who have right knowledge of inequalities could have selected either choices B or C, which again which again tells me that only about 54% of the class could apply their knowledge of inequalities to solve this question. Now, what about the other segment? Again, basics. You need to work on your basics. Now, let's first understand the solution here. You add both the inequalities, right? And what do you get? You get minus 4m is greater than minus 10. Now, would you simply say 4m is greater than 10? If you see minus 4m is greater than minus 10, could you simply translate that into 4m is greater than 10? So for those of you who are saying yes, first of all, let's see how many of you are saying yes over here. How many of you are saying yes? Minus 4m is greater than minus 10. Can we simply say that 4m is greater than 10? All we are doing is canceling out the negative sign from both the sides. Okay, so for the 14 of you who are saying yes, I want you to correct your conceptual understanding here. This is not correct. Whenever you are, think about what's happening here. When I'm canceling out minus sign from both the sides, I'm technically multiplying both sides of the inequality by negative 1. Now, whenever you multiply both sides of the inequality with a negative number, the sign of the inequality needs to change. Okay, that's a conceptual understanding that you absolutely need to have. Okay, so this is not correct. What you end up doing is when you multiply by minus 1 on both the sides, you have to change the sign of the inequality. So now it becomes 4m is less than 10. Okay, which means that m is less than 10 by 4. Okay. Okay, so I want to make sure that all of you are clear about this concept that multiplying both sides of the inequality you need to change the sign of the inequality. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. So this is a very, very important concept. Now, let's talk about what happens next. 4m is less than 10, so m is less than 10 by 4. Now, what we need are non-negative integral values of m. So non-negative numbers include 0 as well, and that is where people who ended up selecting choice B only considered 1 and 2 as the possible values. So for you, people who selected choice B, which was 30% of the class, almost 31% of the class. For you, the takeaway is that I want you to make a note of this. What does non-negative mean? What non-negative integers include 0. Positive integers do not include 0. Non-negative integers include 0. Okay, so that's a note that I want you to make, and because again, these things will end up creating problems for you as you start to solve more difficult questions. So you need to have that level of conceptual clarity so that you are well equipped to apply the process skills as you solve difficult questions. Okay, is this point clear? 30% of the class that selected choice B, do you understand where you faltered? Okay, good. So over here, essentially what we've done over here is we have applied our conceptual understanding of how to solve inequalities. We also applied our process skill. For those of you who selected choice B, they faltered because they didn't apply the process skill of considering all cases. And here, all cases is very specific that 0 has to be included in the set of non-negative integral values. Okay? All right. So tell me, what has been your learning or what have been your learnings from this set of 3 questions? 3 easy questions. Each one of you would have had different learnings from here. But I'm pretty sure, given the accuracy of these questions, you should have had more learnings here. So let's see. I need to review the basics, swap the sign when both negative. Again, I want to edit what you're saying here. You need to swap the sign when you multiply both sides by a negative number. Okay. I should not rush and not overcomplicate. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned the overcomplication part. Quant, as like verbal, is very straightforward. It's very logical, it's very process oriented. So as long as you are applying a very set way of solving questions, you should not have any problems to get to your target score. Watching the videos before the webinars does help. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I should at least try. Absolutely. I'm so glad to hear your comments here. Good. Okay. For those of you who found it too basic, that's good, because that's an indication that you have a very solid conceptual understanding, right? So that's a very important step to move on to solving difficult questions. All right. So now let's look at question number 4 here, and we are increasing the difficulty level, or we are adding a few more concepts now into the mix. So let's go ahead. Click on still solving, please. All right. Good. I'm glad to see the enthusiasm here on the polls. Good. All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end this poll. And I know quite a few of you started putting in your responses, so please finish that up while I bring up the next poll. So we'll do 2 questions in this set. All right, in this one. Here's the poll for question number 5. All right, here you go. Question number 5. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, let's discuss these two questions. Question number 4. Now, question number 4, the correct answer is choice C, which about 62% of the class selected. So that's good. But I could tell that, um, you were taking quite a bit of time to make the final selection, and also there were, so either you know how to solve this or you don't know how to solve this, right? So again, quadratic inequalities, the very basic principle behind quadratic inequalities, if you don't understand how to solve those, is you take, okay, what does it actually say right now? What it says is that you have product of two numbers, x minus 2 into x minus 3. X minus 2 is one number over here, and we just highlight this. This is one number over here, and this is another number over here. Product of two numbers is greater than 0. So what does that mean in terms of your, so what does your conceptual knowledge tell you? That product of two numbers is greater than 0 only if either both of the numbers are positive or both the numbers are negative, right? So you consider both those cases. And then you figure out if x minus 2 is positive, then x is greater than 2. Likewise, if x minus 3 is positive, then x is greater than 3. And you do the same now, and then you combine these two, that for both of these to be possible, that x should be greater than 2 and x should be greater than 3. The common thing is that x needs to be greater than 3 for both of those conditions to be possible. Same thing you do for the case when both need to be negative, right? And there you combine both the equations, and then you get to the final answer that your limit is from minus infinity to 2, which is what this one is, x is less than 2, and then 3 to infinity, which is x is greater than 3, right? So again, very basic way to solve this is solving quadratic inequalities using first principles. Okay, how many of you solved it using this method? Okay, about 40% of the class solved it using this method. What did the rest of you use? What method did the rest of you use? The wavy line approach. Absolutely. The squiggly line or the wavy line approach. All right. Which is what is discussed in my next slide. Now, essentially, I want you to understand the basic principles, the first principles to solve such questions, because when you have a solid understanding of the first principles, you can then utilize the methods in a much more straightforward manner. Okay, so again, a very important for those of you who don't know, who don't have enough knowledge to solve quadratic inequalities, my feedback to you is that when you sit down to learn how to solve these inequalities, don't just do rote memorization of methods. Don't just focus on, oh, I need to learn wavy line method. Understand, try to solve the questions utilizing first principles before you start looking at the methods or before you start memorizing the methods, right? Because if you understand the basic principle, then those methods would come in rather comfortably to you. Okay, now in these in this basic method, we are inferring information as we are moving ahead. In this case over here, we are considering all cases, right? We have considered all cases in which this product can be positive, and then we are solving our stuff, and then we are inferring what is the common range over there. Okay, now the same thing is applicable, as I said, the wavy line method. In the wavy line method, what do you do? Now, again, for those of you who don't understand wavy line method right now, don't worry about it. The concept file that's available to you includes the description of wavy line method. So definitely go through that at your own convenience. But I'm just summarizing it for those of you who are aware of the wavy line method. Okay, so again, by no means consider this to be a teaching a teaching exercise here from my side in teaching you the concept of wavy line method. This is more of a recap, okay? So for the wavy line method, you plot the two roots onto the number line, and then you basically start drawing your curve starting from here. As you're seeing, you basically start drawing your curve like this, going through the two roots, and then you see your inequality is positive. It's greater than 0, right? So above the x-axis, uh, the range of x that lie above the x-axis will constitute the positive, will basically constitute your range, right? So these are the two ranges, A range, and then this one is B range, okay? And that's what is your answer over here. And again, if you don't understand it, don't worry. You have the concept file to go through it. Okay, quadratic inequalities, go through that concept file. That's where we have explained the wavy line method along with solving the method, solving the question through first principles. Okay, but again, you need to have the crux of this is the feedback that I'm giving you is for those of you who were not able to solve this question, and about 40% of the class was not able to solve this question. I want you guys to know, to take this feedback that you have to build this conceptual understanding. Okay. All right. Now question number 5. Let's get the poll for that one. Oh, somehow the results got, okay. All right. So here choice B was the correct answer, and 55% choice, wait a minute, for this one, choice C was the correct answer, -4, 3, and 55% of the class selected this choice. Now, tell me one thing. Can I, in order to simplify this inequality, x minus 3 divided by x plus 4, I know that this inequality is not my typical linear inequality. It is not my typical quadratic inequality. So I need to bring it in the right form. Now, what should I do? Should I simply multiply both sides by x plus 4? And then I end up getting x minus 3 is less than 0. Can I do that? Why not? Why can I not do that? I hear very few responses, but why can I not do that? Because of the sign, absolutely. So we cannot multiply, we cannot apply our simplification techniques that we typically apply whenever we have an equation. Why? Because we don't know if we don't know enough about x to say for sure whether x plus 4 is negative or positive, right? So for that reason, we cannot multiply both sides by x plus 4 to simplify this inequality, okay? So what can we do instead? Instead, because we need to get this inequality in some familiar form for us to be able to solve this inequality, right? Because the forms that we are aware of are linear inequalities and quadratic inequalities. So that is the realm that we are working within, right? So we need to get it in that form. So for that, what we do is we multiply both sides of the inequality by x plus 4 whole square. Why? Because x plus 4 squared is always going to be positive, which means that I will not need to change the sign of the inequality. Okay, and when I do that, what do I get? I get a quadratic inequality over here. And then I simply apply either my first principle method or my wavy line method, and I get to my answer. Okay, now over here, x plus 4 into x minus 3, this is a negative, this is less than 0, which means that the range that would be applicable here is going to be under the x-axis, which means that this is the range, so which is where I get -4, 3. Okay. So again, we solved question number 4 and 5, require your understanding of how to solve quadratic inequalities. In addition to that, you also needed to apply the process skill of manipulation. How do I get? Because you have not been given this as the, let me just get rid of, uh, you have not, the question did not simply start from this point, right? The question did not start from this point. The question started with this inequality over here, right? So you needed to manipulate that inequality appropriately in order to get it to the more familiar inequality, right? And that is where the process skill of manipulate comes into picture. How do you take what's given and how do you get it into the form that you can comfortably solve? Okay, so Again, as you're solving questions, this process skill of manipulate doesn't just apply on algebra questions, it applies to number properties questions as well. Okay. All right. And that is what I'm saying, that as you start to apply these process skills in one subsection, you will start to see the benefits of your increased, enhanced knowledge on the other subsections of quant as well. Okay. All right. Now, I am seeing certain questions in the Q&A part saying that, can you explain the method again? As I said earlier, I will not be teaching you the concepts. Now, these are warm-up questions, which means that these are based on direct application of concepts. So again, if you're not able to get those solutions right now, don't worry. You have the concept files that you can review and get that enhanced conceptual understanding, and then you can come and solve these questions when because we will be sharing the PDF with you. You can come and solve these questions. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's come to question number 6 now, and let me get the poll here. Question number 6 should be an easy one if you know how to solve absolute value questions. Okay, let's get you to select still solving. One more comment that I would want to make is that if you have alternate solutions to the question, again, every quant question can be solved by more than one approaches, right? It's to figure out which approach actually leads you to enhance your skill set so that you can solve higher order questions more comfortably, right? So if you have an alternate approach, I would want you to put that approach in the Q&A part so that Shweta and or Sandeep can review that approach and give you feedback. Because for me, it's very difficult to read your alternate approach in the short answer poll while I'm delivering this session. So I don't want you to lose out on the opportunity to get the feedback from our experts. Okay. So thank you for your understanding here. Okay, so let me show you question number 6 now. Here it goes. Go ahead. All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Interesting. 73% of you selected choice C as the correct answer, which indeed is the correct answer. So again, over here, I'm just going to walk you through the solution real quick. It's a very direct application of how to solve absolute value inequalities. So again, to solve it by first principles, I'm going to take x plus 3 and I'm going to substitute it with z, because I can very well understand absolute values when it pertains to single variable, right? So z is less than or mod of z is less than or equal to 5. I'll visualize this on the number line, and I'll get my I'll get the ranges as -5 is less than or equal to z is less than or equal to 5. I'll replace z back to x plus 3, and I'm going to get this range. -8 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 2. So again, very basic, straightforward application here. Okay. Now again, 28% of the class that couldn't solve this question. Again, this is something that you have to build your conceptual understanding in. Okay. So again, we are manipulating over here. Okay. Um, and then we are drawing the inference. Now, you could have also looked at it from the definition of absolute values. Okay, distance less than or equal to 5 from -3, and then based on that also you could have, this is basically applying the definition of absolute value and then solving the question based on that. And here you're using your translate process skills. Again, as I said, there are more than one ways, more than one elegant ways to solve a question, right? Now, in this case, you could have used the method in the back by on the previous slide, in which we manipulated and then we drew an inference, or you could have simply taken the definition of what is an absolute value and then translated that definition in mathematical terms to solve the question. Okay, but you need to have that conceptual clarity. And usually, people think they need to know the concepts. Just knowing the concepts is not enough. Just knowing on the surface what an absolute value is not enough. You need to have that 200% clarity. You should be able to um, understand everything about that particular concept. Okay, so that's the level of clarity that's required so that you can solve those difficult quant questions easily. Okay, now again, this is the module that we have in our course, and this is all of these concepts are our concepts and quizzes are available to our students. Now, for those of you who are not as yet students, as I said, there are a certain set of concepts from this module which are available in your free trial. So definitely, e-GMAT students go through this section, this module in utmost detail, so that you get that level of clarity, right? And for free trial students, you have these concepts in your free trial as well. Okay. All right. So now let's solve our GMAT level questions. And again, we are still not at 700 level questions. We're still under 700 level questions. But what you'll start to see is that the application is going to get more and more involved. Okay, that's what you're going to see. So let's get the question here. Okay, let's click on still solving. Okay, I'm going to do a quick, not a quick break, but I just want to hear from you right now. How are you finding the session? What have you learned till now? We are done with the first section of the session in which we talked about the conceptual clarity or the importance of conceptual clarity. Now we're going to go into more application of those. So good. More questions? Yes. 8 more questions coming your way. Excellent. Good going. I've learned more about ranges. Good. Very nice. Brushed up the basics. Very helpful. Good so far. Dusted up. Teaching method is amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So let's get going with this. It's an eye-opening session. Good. That's what we hope all the sessions to be, so that you get to learn from each of these webinars that we conduct here. All right. So this is your question here. Go ahead and start solving. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end this session. I'm going to end this poll here. So, about 60% of the class selected choice C, which is indeed the correct answer. So that's good. And again, this one is single linear inequality in one variable. So relatively straightforward. But here is yet another place where you could have faltered if you didn't have thorough understanding of the concept. Okay, so what do? We rearrange the terms here, 16x minus 4. I'm getting all the like terms on the same side, right? So I have all the terms with x on the same side. Okay, now I get minus 32x is greater than 64. Now, how do I simplify the two? Do I say that when I'm multiplying both sides of the inequality by minus 1, I need to change the sign of the inequality, right? Because if I don't change the sign of the inequality, I will end up with x is greater than minus 2. How many of you ended up with x is greater than minus 2? People who selected choices A and B actually ended up with x is greater than minus 2. So that is where you faltered. Okay, so make a note of that. Okay, now we have to multiply both sides. If we have to change the sign of the inequality, so we'll get x is less than minus 2, and then we convert this into the range over here. Okay, and it is minus x is less than x is less than minus 2. Okay, so that's your answer. So again, very straightforward question, still testing you on the same thing, that when you multiply both sides of the inequality by a negative number, you need to change the sign of the inequality. Okay, so I can still see 40% of the class is still not comfortable with that concept. So again, my feedback to you, make a note of that concept right now, because you will get to apply that concept on some other questions as well. And then after the session, please make sure that you get that 200% clarity in this. Okay, now the next question over here has the same inequality. The first inequality is the same, the second inequality is different, right? So let's go ahead and get you to mark the answer for this one. Go ahead. If you can click on still solving, I'd appreciate that. Okay, go ahead. All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So what you can see over here is, okay, the correct answer here is choice B, -5. Now, so only 30% of the class could select the correct choice. But is that all because you didn't know how to solve inequalities? Would it be a correct inference that only 30% of the class knows how to solve inequalities, linear inequalities? No. The correct inference here needs to be a little bit more deep. Okay. So one thing is, so let me give you the positive news, the good news first. In the previous question, 30% of the class didn't remember to apply the concept of changing the sign of the inequality. Now, after that constant reminder for this question, quite a few of you, almost, I would say 84%, 85% of the class has now started to apply that concept correctly. Okay, why am I saying that? Those of you who've selected choices A and B have most likely selected it for the right reasons. Okay, have most likely solved the two linear inequalities correctly. And let me walk you through the solution so that whatever I'm saying makes more sense to you. So these are the two inequalities here. Both the inequalities are in x. So you have a single variable. We need to find the minimum value of x. Now, what do I know? Is there a constraint here? Absolutely. It says that minimum value of the integer x. So I know that x is an integer. So you needed to make a note of that when you read the question statement. Before you started solving the question, you needed to make a note of that x is an integer. Okay. Now, once you made a note of that, you then carry forward, right? You know that x is less than 2 from your previous solution for the first inequality. The next inequality is what you need to solve here. And when you do that, 2x is greater than or equal to -11. You need to multiply both sides by -1 here. So you will end up, well, in this case, you don't need to do that. Sorry, in this case, you don't need to do that. In this case, you simply divide both sides by 2 and you get x is greater than or equal to -5.5, right? Now, this is where you have to now look at what are the possible integers within the range x is less than -2 and x is greater than or equal to -5.5. Over here, you needed to find out the minimum value of x, and minimum value of x is not -5.5, it is -5 because x is an integer. So the reason why most of you faltered in this question was not because you don't have conceptual understanding. It was because you didn't pay attention to the constraint that was there. Okay, you needed to pay attention to the constraint that x is an integer and you faltered there. So you got this wrong because you failed to apply the process skill of apply constraints. Okay. Now, how many of you would have looked at the solution and classified this mistake as a silly mistake? Thinking that, okay, majority of the concept I know how to solve inequality. So this was just a silly mistake that I didn't look at the integer. I didn't look at the fact that x is an integer. Now, this is what I was talking about early on in the introduction of the session. Okay, I don't want you to classify any mistake as a silly mistake. Okay, why? Because those silly mistakes are artifacts of you not applying those process skills, such as apply constraints process skills. Okay, very, very important, because now imagine you fail to look at such important information in the question stem in question after question, and you continue to classify those mistakes as silly mistakes. What are you doing to your preparation? All you're making sure is that you know how to apply the concept of how to solve inequalities. But you are not keeping in mind, you're not working on how is it that you extract information from the question statement? How is it that you make sure that you keep the important information into consideration as you're solving the question? You're not working on those skills at all, which is why students remain stagnant on that Q46 or Q47 despite spending hours and hours, despite solving thousands and thousands of questions. How many of you can relate to that? Good. So again, focus on process skills. Okay. So Shweta and Sandeep, can you share the link to our YouTube playlist for process skills? Again, we have recently launched a course which is available on YouTube on it's a mini course on explaining to you these process skills. So definitely take the time in reviewing those videos. So the total of six process skills, and we each of those process skills has been explained using three examples in the course. Okay, so as you go through those, you will be able to appreciate the importance of these process skills, and as you solve questions on your own, you will start to consciously apply those process skills. Okay, so I want you to start doing that. All right. Okay, now this was the first GMAT level question, and look at the amount of discussion that we have had in that question. And that's the beauty of following, um, uh, that's the beauty of, going through those core skills, which are not just which include not just your conceptual understanding, but also your process skills, your ability to apply those process skills. Okay, so let's now solve this question here, question number 3. And here you go. Can you click on still solving, please? The total of 8 questions. We are on question number 3 right now. Go ahead. All right. Last 15 seconds. All right. I'm going to end the poll here, and we'll discuss the answer. I was just getting the link for you all. Here's the link before I go into the discussion. Here's the link. So just click on it, and you should be able to click on browse to, and then you should bookmark this right now. So, and I'll share this link with you later on as well. Okay. I'm just going to leave it down here while I discuss this question. Okay. All right, so let's go into this one, quadratic inequality. Actually, after this question, there is another one that I want you to answer. And let's get that one as well. It's pretty similar to this question, but just be very careful as you read the question statement. There you go. Click on still solving, please. All right, go ahead and solve question number 4. This is question number 4. Again, similar inequality, but different question. All right, last 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So we'll discuss this question later. Let's talk about question number 3 first. Now what's happening here? What is the range of values for z square given that z square plus 4 times z square minus 2 is less than 0? Okay. Now tell me something. Just looking at what the question is saying, the range of values for z square, tell me, can z square ever be a negative number? And again, for those of you who selected choice A, what you ended up doing was you looked at minus 4, you simply looked at, okay, z square plus 4, z square minus 2, you applied your wavy line method or the method of um, based on the first principles, and you came up with this range, right? But tell me, z square, can that ever be a negative number? No. And that is the mistake that you did over here. You didn't apply the constraint that the concept of square of a number imposes on the variable for which you need to figure out the range. Okay, so again, conceptually, you knew how to solve a quadratic inequality. Okay, so there's nothing wrong in your application of that concept over here. But why you ended up getting this question wrong, and quite a few of you, only 30% of the class got this question right. Choice D is the correct answer. Okay. For people who selected choice A, there is nothing wrong with your conceptual understanding of how to solve a quadratic inequality. Why you faltered here was because you didn't apply the constraint. You were able to draw this inference appropriately that z squared is going to be less than 2, but you failed to apply this constraint here, which is why you got this question wrong. And I'm pretty sure that when you would review the solution on your own, you would end up classifying this mistake as a silly mistake. Is that correct? For people who selected choice A. Okay, so the learning for you, for people who selected choice A, about 40% of the class, is that from now on, whenever you review the solution, I'm not saying that you will not stop making such mistakes. You will make these mistakes. Making mistakes is fine in the learning process. But not doing, classifying that mistake as a silly mistake, that's not acceptable if you want to get to that 90th percentile in quant. You need to classify that mistake appropriately. And over here, the reason why you made this mistake was because you failed to apply the constraint that z square imposes on that square of a number imposes on the variable. Right? In terms of concept, and again, I know this is very basic, but this basic stuff is where you falter. This basic stuff is what leads you to solve so many questions without getting the right benefit. Okay, so that's why I want you to start focusing on the process skills from today onwards and be very attentive. Review the solutions that are written in detailed manner, that are written based on these process skills, so that you can learn from that. You can take that feedback into your preparation going forward. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? Good. All right, now the next question was if z is an integer. Now here we are saying that z is an integer, right? So let me walk you through this one. So here, again, you're starting off with this range, and I'm not sure why you guys took so long to answer this question. And let me get the poll for that one too. Less than 50% of the class selected the correct choice, right? And again, you guys had already, again, you may have, for those of you who selected choice A in the previous question would have definitely faltered here as well. But this question is relatively straightforward, right? Z is an integer. You need to find the integer values. Z squared could be 0 or 1, and 2 is the correct answer over here. Okay. So again, you need to apply the constraints and you need to infer the appropriate answer. Okay, so very brief overview of the concepts here. Again, simplifying an equation, focusing on the constraints and reading the question statement appropriately. Okay, now these were still not 700 level questions. We are going to go into the 700 level questions now. Okay, four more questions to go. And these are all 700 level questions. The first one is problem solving. The last three questions will be data sufficiency. Okay. All right. Let's go. Now, what are you, so before I go further, what are you going to focus on as you solve these four questions? What will change in your approach? Read. What else? More methodical process skills. Look for constraints, applying the basics, right? Focus on the concept. Okay. Now tell me something. How many of you are feeling the need for those tricks or shortcuts? Okay, let me rephrase my question. Do you think any of these questions could be solved using shortcuts or tricks? Yes or no? No. People who look for shortcuts and tricks, they don't have the conceptual clarity. Okay, here's my very basic principle. If you are relying on shortcuts and tricks and tips from other people, if you're relying on other people or other sources to give you the tricks, this means that you don't have the conceptual clarity, you don't have the right level of process acumen till now. Okay, versus, again, I want to make this statement clear as well. If you have the right level of conceptual clarity, that 200% conceptual clarity, and if you know how to apply the process skills well, then you will yourself be able to come up with those shortcuts and tricks and tips to solve questions. You will not be reliant on an external source to give you those shortcuts. Keep in mind that mantra. Okay, there is a right time to look for shortcuts. There's nothing wrong with shortcuts, but there is the right time to look for shortcuts. And you shouldn't be reliant on somebody else to give you the shortcuts. Is this point clear? Good. All right, so now let's move on to the first question here. This is the only problem solving question. Let's get you to click on still solving. Go ahead, click on still solving. Again, be very methodical as you solve this question. Okay, I am going to give you ample amount of time. Okay, go ahead. Last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. I do see that about 25% of the class has still not selected the correct answer, but that's okay. Now, what was difficult about this question? What was so complicated? What we have are two linear inequalities in two variables. So what was so difficult about it? Many constraints, positive difference, okay, practice issue, too many steps, reading it slowly. Okay, all right. So let's go through the solution, and again, you will need to absorb the solution. So let's look at that. That's a good question I have in the Q&A pod. When to apply the integer constraint? Last step on the number line. That's a good point. All right. So what's the constraint? That x and y are positive integers, right? Now what do? That's a constraint that we have. Now we have two linear inequalities in two variables. So we need to bring those linear inequalities in the standard form. Okay. Then we need to solve them, and then we need to find our answer. Okay. Now x plus 2y is greater than 20, right? So I bring it into the linear form as shown. Okay. I do the same thing for my second linear inequality as well. I have to make sure that both of these have the same sign, greater than 0, greater than 0. Okay. Standard form is nothing but you have the x of y and the constant on the same side with the same side of the inequality for both the inequalities, right? Now, I have to manipulate them. I have to solve these inequalities. Now, you could use more than one methods here. The method that I have over here is I'm first multiplying both inequality 1 by 3 so that I can cancel out the x variable and get the value of y. Okay, that's what I'm doing here first. I'm getting y as greater than 6. Okay, so this is my first attempt at manipulation over here to get to the range of y. Then what I'm doing is I am adding the two inequalities. So let's look at this one over here. So I add 5 and 2. Okay, I add this one over here, 5 and 2, and when I do that, so this one, number 5, and then this one, number 2, and when I do that, I get the inequality, I get the range for x. X is less than 8, okay? So once I do that, what do I need? I need the positive difference between minimum value of x and minimum value of y. Now, what is the minimum value of x? Now, this is where I need to draw inferences, okay? If x is less than 8, okay. Okay, so now for those of you who were not able, how many of you were not able to get to the values of the ranges of x and y as shown over here, that y is greater than 6 and x is less than 8? How many of you were not able to get there? So because for people who were not able to get to y is greater than 6 and x is less than 8, you made a mistake in the application of how to solve linear inequality in two variables. Okay, simple application of the concept, nothing else. So you need to either understand the concept better, or you need a little bit more practice in applying those concepts of how to solve linear inequality. Okay, so for that you will need to learn how to manipulate the given inequalities. What are the various ways to manipulate in order to get to the solution? Okay, that's feedback number one. Now, for those of you who were able to get there, now the question becomes, how do you proceed further? Okay, so how do you figure out the minimum value of x? Now, x is less than 8, and you also know that x is greater than 0. So the minimum value of x is 1. Likewise, y is greater than 6. So, and y is an integer. So the minimum value of y is 7. So the correct answer here is simply 7 minus 1, which is equal to 6. Now again, positive difference. We needed the positive difference, which means that what we needed was difference between minimum value of x minus difference of between minimum value of x minus minimum value of y mod of that. That's what positive difference tells me, and that's why choice E is the correct answer. So, is there anything uber difficult in this question? Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. How is the minimum value of x equal to 1? See, x is less than 8. What do you have here? You have, this is the final range that you got for x. X is less than 8. And what do you know? You know that x and y are positive integers, which means x and y are greater than 1, greater than or equal to 1, right? So that's where you get that the minimum value of x will be 1. Okay? All right. So there's nothing uber complicated about this. So why did you falter? Now that we've gone through the entire solution, tell me, is it the conceptual clarity? Is it that you are not 100% confident with how to solve linear inequalities? Okay, so let me ask you this question here. Why did you falter? Select yes if you faltered because you don't have 100% conceptual clarity in how to solve linear inequalities in two variables. Okay, so about 55% of the class. All right. Next question. Did you falter because you weren't able to select the minimum value of x and y? Select yes if you faltered in selecting the minimum value of x and y. And that is where that's the application of the process scale of understanding the constraints and drawing inferences. Okay, I have a question. Can we take minimum value of x is equal to 0? No, you cannot. Why? Because it's given in the question statement that x and y are positive integers. Positive means that it's greater than 0. Okay, 0 is not a positive number. It's a non-negative number. Okay, I have another question. How do we know that we have to solve equations 5 and 2? Again, as I said, when you have, you can get to the ranges of x and y in some other order as well. There's no problems with that. Again, you can manipulate the given inequalities in whichever way you want in order to get to the final ranges. Okay, but what you cannot do is you cannot take up you cannot, while you're solving for the ranges, you cannot take minimum value of y and get the range for x. That's something that you cannot do. Okay, that's very important for you to understand. Okay, but whichever method you utilize, there is only one solution. You cannot get multiple solutions if you use multiple methods to get there. No. Whichever way you manipulate, you need to end up getting the same ranges of x and y, because if you're not, then that means there is something wrong in the manipulation that you are doing. Okay? All right, so again, what you're seeing over here is the same theme, conceptual clarity and skill set in applying the process skills. All right, so now let's move on to our next question, which is our first data sufficiency question. So let's get you all to click on still solving. 3 more questions in this session. Go ahead. All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Wow. It's pretty spread out responses. Choice A, 17%, choice B, 11%, C, 27%, E, 27%. Okay, all right. Let's go through the answers, the solution here. The question is saying, if is Z an integer such that mod of Z is less than, if, okay, let me read the question statement. Z is an integer such that mod of Z is less than 6, is Z positive? Okay. Now, we need to figure out, is Z positive? That is Z greater than 0? And what we know is that Z is an integer. We also know that mod of Z is less than 6, which means that Z can have each of any of these 11 values, minus 4, so on till 0, then 1, so on till plus 5. So we need to figure out, is Z a positive number? That is Z 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 here, right? Because based on the information over here, Z can take on any of these 11 possible values. Okay, so what am I doing here? I'm simply taking the question statement and I'm translating that into mathematical terms so that I am more familiar with what is it exactly that I have to do. I mean, mod of Z is less than 6. This is a little bit more difficult for me to carry forward to my individual statement analysis. So I need to simplify that further. I need to understand what does that actually mean in terms of the possible values of Z. So this is where I'm applying the process scale of translate to get to what it actually means, to get to the information in more simplistic terms here. Okay. All right. So that's what I'm doing here. Now let's take up Z statement 1. Mod of Z minus 2 is greater than 3. Now mod of Z minus 2 is greater than 3. How can I write that information? Essentially, um, okay, so I'm going to skip all of this because this is just explaining to you the concept. Mod of Z minus 2 greater than 3 implies that Z minus 2 is greater than 3, right? Or the negative side, Z minus 2 is less than minus 3. Now, if you are confused about how we got to this point, you need to work on your conceptual clarity with regards to absolute value inequalities. Okay, how many of you are confident about what we've done over here? This is a direct application of the concept. How many of you are absolutely confident about it? So for those of you who are not, I do see a couple of you who are not, you need to work on your conceptual clarity. Again, look at the concept file that's shared with you in the free trial. Okay. Now, for now, let's just say that you have built this conceptual understanding and let's carry forward with the solution. What do you get? From this, you get Z is greater than 5. And from this side, you get Z is less than minus 1. So based on this, you will say that Z can be either positive because Z is greater than 5 and Z can be negative because Z is less than 1. So you don't have the you don't have enough information to say for sure whether Z is positive or not. How many of you would draw that inference here? Okay, quite a few of you would draw that inference. Okay, now think about it this way. What information do we have from the question statement? The question statement told us that minus 6 is less than Z is less than 6, right? And we also know that Z is an integer, right? So what is it if you combine Z is greater than 5 with Z is less than 6? Is there any integer that is greater than 5 but less than 6? No, there isn't. And which is where you are applying the constraint that you have been provided in the question statement. You are also applying the information that you have about Z in the question statement, and you're combining that information over here with this Z is greater than 5, and what you arrive at is that there is no integer value between 5 and 6, which means that this one over here is not even applicable. So where we thought that z could be both positive and negative, that is that one positive thread is absolutely decimated because it's not a condition that's possible, given what we know about z from the question statement. Is this point clear? Yes or no? Again, what you're doing is you're doing a thorough analysis of the question statement. From the question statement, you were able to figure out that this part over here. So let me just highlight that part. From the question statement, you were able to figure out that minus 6 is less than z is less than 6, right? From the question statement, you know that z is an integer, okay? You combine that information with what you get from here, z is greater than 5, and you say, oh, there is no integral value between 5 and 6. Okay, that's what you're doing. You're arriving at, you're drawing appropriate inferences so that you can figure out is the statement sufficient or not. Now, z is less than 5. Absolutely. Z is less than 5 and minus 6 is less than z. Then z is greater than minus 6. So there you have potential values. What you're saying is that z is not positive, which means that now all the values are negative. So you have the answer for your question. Z is not positive, which means that statement 1 is sufficient. Now only 17% of you selected choice A as the correct answer. Now there are folks who selected choice D as the correct answer as well, and we will come to statement 2. But first, tell me, for those of you who made a mistake, where did you make a mistake? For those of you who thought that statement 1 is not sufficient, where did you falter? Didn't notice that z is an integer. So what process skill is that? If you didn't notice that z is an integer, what process skill is that? Apply the constraint. Absolutely. Absolutely. Forgot that z lies between minus 6 and 6. Now this is a data sufficiency related process skill that you need to simplify the question statement enough before you move on to the individual statements. This is a data sufficiency related process step. Okay, and you need to take that analysis of the question statement with you. Okay. Data sufficiency questions are as such very straightforward questions. If you think about it, you have been given a set of information in the question statement, and the question statement asks you the question. All you have to figure out is the additional information that you get from statement 1. Is that enough to answer the question that the question is asking? Likewise, the additional information that you get from statement 2, is that sufficient to answer the question that the question is asking? That's about it. And then if the individual statements are not sufficient, then you think about, okay, does combining the two sets of information along with the information that's there in the question statement, is that sufficient? If you understand the basics behind the data sufficiency questions as such format itself, you will find that it's relatively straightforward. But the key over here is you need to have that solid understanding of concepts and process skills. Okay? All right. So let's now come to statement 2. Statement 2 is relatively straightforward. Mod of z is equal to 2, which means that z could be plus 2 or z could be minus 2, which means that statement 2 is not sufficient. So the correct answer is choice A. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to question number 7. Again, question 7 is a very basic question on, it's a difficult question, but it's a relatively straightforward from the standpoint of concept application. So please click on still solving. All right, there you go. All right, last few seconds here. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so there is, interesting. So choice A, D, and B. Okay. So a number of you think that individually these two choices are sufficient. Okay. All right. Let's go through it. Is A less than B? That's all the question is asking. So there isn't much. All we need to figure out is, can we say for sure that A is less than B or not? Okay, that's what it's asking. Okay. Now let's look at statement 1. Mod of A minus B is equal to B minus A. What does this mean? When you look at this term over here, mod of A minus B. Now what do you know about modulus of a number? What do you know about modulus of a number? It could be any number. Let's say this was mod of x minus y. It's positive or zero. Absolutely. It's a non-negative number. So what can I say? What I can say is that because whatever there is, this is a modulus, which means that b minus a over here is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, it's going to be greater than or equal to 0, which means that b could be equal to 0 or b could be greater than 0. Sorry, that a could be equal to b or a could be less than b. So essentially b minus a is greater than or equal to 0, which means b is greater than or equal to a, which means that either both are equal or b is greater than a, which means that statement 1 is not sufficient. So why did you falter over here? Almost all of you made this mistake, except for people who selected choices C and E. Almost everybody made this mistake. Now, when you say you missed the equal to sign, okay, so if you don't understand the concept that we are applying over here is the straightforward concept of absolute value. Okay, so if you don't understand, so again, it's not that you don't know what an absolute value is. What you But you don't have that 100% clarity, that 200% clarity on that regarding that concept. This is what I meant when I said that you need to not just know what a modulus is, but also you need to know what exactly it is that you are looking at. Okay. So statement 1 is not sufficient. Let's now take a look at statement 2. Statement 2, what does it say? A divided by B is less than 1. Now here, again, you have two cases. You can't just say A is less than B here. You can't just take B on the other side and say A is less than B. Okay, why? Because B could be a negative number as well. And if B is a negative number, then you will need to multiply both sides of the inequality with a negative. You'll have to change the sign of the inequality when you move B on the other side. Okay, so essentially you take case 1. Case 1 is B greater than 0, which means that A is less than B. Case 2 is B less than 0, which is when we have to flip the sign of the inequality and you get A is greater than B. Either way, statement 2 is also not sufficient. So again, you need to consider all the cases here. In this case, all the cases is really you need to consider both the cases. Okay. Now you combine both the statements together. When you combine the statements together, you have to see if both the statements were true, then what needs to be true. If both of these statements are true, then definitely the only way that both these statements can be true is when A is definitely less than B. So you need to figure out the common parts between the two. Okay, so what you get is A is less than B. Okay, so the correct answer here is choice C. Okay. So you can solve this. So I'm seeing some comments here in the Q&A pod. Why can't we open the modulus? You can definitely open the modulus also. There's nothing wrong in that. Just be sure that you consider greater than or equal to sign. That's very much important. You need to consider the equal to sign as well. Okay. So what do you understand from this question now? Where did you falter? So I hope that people who selected choice C selected it for the right reasons. But for all those, where did you falter? I'm seeing time limit was an issue. I don't see time as an issue at all. I gave you ample amount of time. Just think about it. If you had all the conceptual clarity, if you had your process skills clear, you wouldn't have even needed a minute to solve this question. You have a problem with solving the questions within the time limit only because you don't have that much required clarity. When you say forgot equal to 0 in statement 1, that is your process skill of considering all the cases, which essentially stem from your understanding of absolute value. Okay? So again, think about it this way. Yes, you're making these mistakes right now, right? But the feedback that you're getting from here, that feedback is so very critical for how is it that you should be preparing going forward. Okay? If you get the feedback that you need to work on your concepts, which is rather straightforward, I mean, just focus on the concepts. Just don't say, okay, I know what a modulus is. No, there's no ego about it. Just go into getting to that 200% clarity and know that you need to work on the process skills. And process skills are nothing out of the world, they are just there to give you structure to how you apply the concepts. Okay, they need to go hand in hand with your conceptual understanding. So, process skills are nothing but those little steps that take you closer to the final solution. Okay. All right, so now with this, let's go on to our last question, which is also pretty similar to what we have done in the previous question and also what we did early on in one of the other questions regarding modulus. So go ahead and solve this question. Click on still solving, please. All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so let's solve this question now. Is z greater than 2? So what we need to figure out is z greater than 2? Nothing much to it. No constraints specified here on z. So let's take a look at statement 1. Mod of z minus 2 whole square is greater than 4. Now tell me here, mod of z minus 2 whole square. Now z minus 2 whole square is anyway, because it's a square of a number, so it's going to be positive, right? So if I have a positive number within the mod, the result is definitely going to be positive, right? Again, square of any number is always non-negative, so modulus doesn't really have any impact here. It doesn't do anything to to the information about z. So essentially all I can say over here is that I can remove the mod because modulus is just adding that additional complexity, and I can simply say z minus 2 whole square is greater than 4, right? There's nothing wrong in doing that. I'm simplifying the information that I have. Now, what do I have? Z minus 2 whole square is greater than 4. What I'm doing is I'm writing 4 as 2 squared. Okay. Then I'm saying, okay, z minus 2 whole square. I bring 2 square on this side. So what do I see? I see this as the form of a square minus b square is greater than 0. Now a square minus b square, that's an algebraic identity that I'm aware of. So I'm going to simplify this as z minus 2 a minus b into a plus b is greater than 0. That's the algebraic identity that I'm applying here. What I end up getting is z minus 4 into z is greater than 0. Okay, and this is where I am. So now I'm applying the wavy line method, and the answer, the range that I get is that either z is less than 0 or z is greater than 4. Okay, which means I cannot tell if z is greater than 2 because z could fall in this range or z could fall in this range, which means statement 1 is not sufficient. Okay, but just look at how I have done statement 1. I have first taken the information over here and I have simplified that information and I got to a quadratic inequality. And then I'm applying the concept of how do I solve quadratic inequality using the wavy line method over here, or you could use the first principles method that you've used that we used early on. So you could use any of those two concepts and you infer that okay, z is, I don't know if z is greater than 2. Okay, so again, two things that we are doing here. One is simplifying, okay, which is a process skill, and the other is simple conceptual application of your quadratic inequality. Okay, that's what we are doing over here. Now let's come to statement number 2. Statement 2 is actually pretty similar to the previous statement. What am I seeing here? To the previous question. Mod of some number, okay, and this is some number here x, which has two variables x and k, which has two numbers x and k, for which I don't have the actual value, right? But all I know is that z is equal to mod of this number, and this is where I apply my conceptual understanding of what modulus is. Modulus is always a non-negative number, right? So I end up getting z is greater than or equal to 0. What am I doing here? I'm translating this information, or I'm inferring what does this information tell me about z. I'm drawing an inference based on my conceptual understanding. Okay, and here if I forget to, and again, because I have that much clarity on regarding my absolute value concept, I know that there are two cases: either z is greater than 0 or z is equal to 0. Either which way, I don't know if z is greater than 2 or not. Okay, now I combine the two bits of information. What do I get? The only range that's common over here is z greater than 4, z greater than 0. When I combine these two, what do I get? Z is greater than 4. Okay, because any number that's greater than 4 will also be greater than 0. So I need to find out the common range that is true, that makes both these statements true. Okay, so combining the information from two statements, I can get to the correct answer. I can answer the question that's been asked in the question statement. So again, the key thing over here is you need to have that 100% more than 100% conceptual understanding and the ability to apply process skills. And if you have that, GMAT Quant can very well be mastered. You whichever score level you're at, whether you are starting off and you're at a low quant score, or you have been a quant whiz, you have been strong in quant in your high school days, and you're starting off at, let's say, Q45, you will be able to get to that Q49, Q50 if you focus on these two aspects: 100% conceptual understanding and the ability to apply process skills. So I'm going to share a few stories with you right now. Krish, he scored a Q51, and this story is for people who think that they're good in quant to begin with. Okay, and you should definitely read his verified review as well on GMAT Club. Now, Krish had always done well in quant, but he was stumped by the GMAT. He constantly faltered while answering GMAT questions, falling in familiar traps. Frustrated with the lack of his progress, he decided to change his approach, and he started a methodical approach to solving quant questions. And after making these changes, he was able to score a Q51, getting to that 740 GMAT score. Okay. Now the next one over here is of Leonardo, someone who has not been excellent in GMAT quant and who was stuck at Q45 despite trying really hard. Now he needed a high quant score because he wanted to apply to finance focused schools such as NYU, Wharton, and schools such as Stepper. Now, to improve beyond Q45, Leo adopted a methodical approach. He started focusing on constraints. He started focusing on those process skills. He started showing his work on paper. And once he had the approach right, he made extensive use of analytics that Quant Scholaranium provides so that he could isolate the areas he needed to improve upon. Now, today, we saw in so many solutions that it's not just about knowing the concept, it's also knowing why you are making a mistake. Okay, and are you not translating enough? Do you not know how to simplify information? Do you fail to consider constraints? So your ability to apply those process skills is the key to you acing the GMAT. Okay, and finally over here, coming back to Leonardo, because of his good quant score and excellent verbal score, Leonardo was admitted to Wharton, Stern, and Tepper. Now let's talk about Mazibar. Mazibar is a student who was extremely weak in quant. His starting score was Q30, and that's a mere 20 percentile. Now he spent a ton of time reading quant books but was not able to improve. He benefited tremendously from the progressive learning architecture at e-GMAT, in which he was able to cement his basics before taking on difficult questions. And in his case, and in case his basics were not strong enough, he was given appropriate feedback by the system. Mazibar was able to improve to Q45, which is 59 percentile, and that was a huge improvement over his starting score. Now, Guillermo, his story is again an amazing story of an individual who had extremely strong determination to study at top B schools. He started at Q38 and he realized that he needed a stellar quant score to get into Wharton and GSB Chicago. And the only way to improve from such a low score was to truly focus on learning, which he did using the video lessons. He was short on time, so he used analytics in Quant Scholaranium to isolate the areas where he needed most help. Like Leonardo, he used the custom quiz feature to ensure that he did indeed improve on those topics. Okay, so again, whichever case you take, regardless of your starting point, to ace GMAT Quant, you need to focus on learning and you need to adopt good habits. Okay, so focus on that 200% clarity, focus on that your attention to learning those process skills. Okay. This we have come to the end of this session. Now what I am going to ask you is, let me move on to the next poll over here. I will also share the link to the process skills, and I'm going to upload the presentation as well. But in the meanwhile, if you could give us your feedback, what did you learn from the session? What did you like in the session? I would truly appreciate that. And I will upload the file. So I know a couple of you are asking me about going back to a particular slide. Just give me a couple of seconds. I'll upload the file so that you can um, download it at your end. That way you have the PDF with you. All right, so okay, so here's the session presentation. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm glad to hear to read your comments here. That's really good. Um, Okay. As long as you can understand where you're faltering, that was the main thing. And now I want you to take that feedback with you and implement that feedback in your preparation, not just for algebra, but for all of quant. Again, you need to focus on the core skills. That's the most important thing in verbal, in quant, right? So again, core skills and verbal include your reading. How do you read a sentence? How do you figure out its sentence structure? How do you read the sentence with strategic pausing to understand the meaning, right? Likewise, core skills in CR include, how do you draw inferences from single statements? How do you draw inferences from multiple statements? How do you pre-think, right? Likewise, in RC, you need to employ reading strategies to understand what the passage is, right? Likewise, in quant, you have these process skills that you need to build your understanding of. You need to be skilled in process skills so that you can solve quant questions correctly. Okay. Do you have e-GMAT physical classes in Mumbai? No, we don't hold any physical classes. Everything that we do is in the online medium. We have our self-paced learning courses, which you can get access to as soon as you purchase the content. Okay. All right, then. That's about it. If again, good luck for your preparation and write to us at payal@e-gmat.com if you have any questions. We have our strategy team standing by to address any questions that you may have with regards to your GMAT preparation, with regards to quant or verbal. Okay. All right. Good luck, everyone. And it was wonderful conducting this session. You were a wonderful audience.